Thank you. Welcome, everyone. We're going to call this meeting to order now. It is 6:34 p.m. on January 19, 2023, and this is a public meeting of the City of Portland Police Accountability Commission. If the Spanish language interpreters, Gaby or Luisa, can please give the information on the Spanish language interpretation. Gaby o Luisa, ¿quién de ustedes puede dar el mensaje en español? Ok. Yo voy a dar el mensaje entonces en español. Para mí, to me, I don't know for others, the slides are very big, but maybe it's my computer. I just want to make sure. But I will say, esta junta es una junta pública que está sujeta a la ley estatal de Oregon y a la ciudad de Portland con las reglas administrativas y va a ser grabada. El lenguaje en español está disponible para esta junta. Cuando quieran tener acceso al lenguaje de español y a la interpretación, por favor, vean su video de feed por la gente que está hablando y el audio, el sonido será reemplazado por el intérprete. Para tener acceso a esto, por favor, hagan clic donde dice interpretación, language interpretation, en el Zoom, en los controles de Zoom, abajo en su pantalla y seleccione español. Thank you. Thank you. The city also offers ASL interpretation, which is being provided by Andrea and Amanda. Please pin their video feed to see their interpretation throughout the meeting. The closed captioning is turned on in Zoom as another means of assistance, but please note that this is an automatic captioning service and is not always accurate. The city supports access to meetings of the Police Accountability Commission and can provide other language support as well. Please email in advance of future public meetings, either as a response to a public meeting notice or directly to policeaccountability@portlandoregon.gov to ask for other access assistance, including interpretation into other languages. This meeting is a public meeting subject to City of Portland Administrative Code and Oregon State Law and is being recorded. For this meeting, the chat function is enabled for commission members to communicate with each other. Members of the public will be able to use questions using Zoom's Q&A feature as the commissioners are presenting and or discussing things. If attendees have questions, please feel free to submit them through Q&A. We hope to use this feature to help guide our conversation during the meeting and future meetings agenda topics. We'd like to be clear that not all questions will be answered during the meeting, but if answered, both the question and answer will be visible to you and will become part of the meeting record. To access this feature, just click on the Q&A icon in the middle of the screen. And I will pass it to the co-chairs for the land acknowledgement.
Hi, thank you. Christian, full commission co-chair. We are doing this land acknowledgement. Sorry, I lost what I was going to say. Subcommittee co-chair Dan Handelman has been giving a little bit of a preface to these land acknowledgements, and I wanted to take a page out of that book because I agree with him. He's just been doing a preface is that I personally wouldn't necessarily do this land acknowledgement. Like, this is not strong enough for me, and I feel like other people on the commission also kind of agree with that here and there. So I just wanted to state that For anyone out there who feels like this isn't strong enough, we agree with you, but this is the one we're using right now because it's the one that's on display at City Hall. With that, here it is. We acknowledge that the rivers, lakes, streams, and lands of the lower Willamette River rest upon the occupied territories of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz, Cathlamet, Clackamas, Chinook, Tualatin, Kalapuya, Molalla, and many other tribes. We recognize the many villages, traditions, cultures, and relationships that existed along the river since time immemorial. We recognize these tribes stewarded these lands and rivers since time immemorial for future generations. We recognize and undertake responsibility for the destruction of the river and land, of traditional food sources, sacred places, and multifaceted ways of life. We acknowledge the economic and social values that enabled the harm to the river, including systemic racism, classism, and other systems of oppression that perpetuated harm against Black, Indigenous, and immigrant communities along the river. With this acknowledgement, we commit to honoring and learning from the past and working towards a more equitable and sustainable future for the lower Willamette River. We commit to seeking solutions that acknowledge the inequities of past socioeconomic policies and the harm done to people and our relationships to these lands and waters. Cool. Thank you. I'll pass it back to the facilitators.
Thank you, Co-Chair Christian. Now we're gonna read first, meditate, and reflect on our community agreements. There is a couple pages for these community agreements, and each person will read. And then at the end, I will ask the question. Next page, please. Thank you. And then I will ask the question, do we all commit to following the community agreements for today's meeting and to gently calling in our college and collaborators if needed? Please show me your thumbs up. Thank you. Okay, I will pass it to the co-chairs to discuss the timeline.
Thank you, Victoria. This meeting is part of the Police Accountability Commission's Powers and Duties phase of work, which focuses on the functions of the new system. Future phases of the work will develop the form of the new system, as well as how it relates to the rest of the city government and the transition plan from our current system to the new one. The commission will present all proposed changes to the city council in 2023 for their consideration and approval. This slide shows the outcome documents for the powers and duties phase based on the agenda and scope approved by the commission. 2 of these documents are being developed by their respective subcommittees. The third has been developed and preferred and will be the primary focus of today's meeting. The draft areas of agreement on access to information. This slide is the current project plan for the powers and duties phase of the Police Accountability Commission's work. It will be updated as needed throughout this phase of work. This slide is for members of the public to be able to understand how the commission gets from now through the end of the phase, which focuses on identifying areas of agreement among commission members as to the functions of the new system. Today's meeting is part of the blue box with the red border near the upper right corner of the screen. And following today, here are the upcoming meetings of the PAC. Specifically, we'd like to highlight the commission is planning a community listening session Q&A for Tuesday, January 31st, which will be held over Zoom. The subcommittee on officer accountability will be meeting this Saturday, January 21st at 2 p.m. And lastly, the subcommittee on structural oversight will be meeting at 6:30 p.m. this upcoming Monday, January 23rd. Today's meeting agenda includes an equity training. It also includes working through the draft areas of agreement on access to information, flagging items for further discussion, resolving items, and if possible, approving the final document as the PAC areas of agreement on access to information. All document approval processes include a review of the PAC values and goals and hearing public comment on the specific document. The PAC will also discuss definitions of two of the terms council has mandated that the commission define: accountability and independent judgment. No decision is expected on that today, but a decision may be made in the next few weeks. There are also some phase of work transition conversations and an open public comment period on the agenda, as well as subcommittee reports. I will pass it back to the facilitator.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Now I will pass it to Dr. Moses, the one that she's gonna provide the training, the equity training as always. Thank you, Dr. Moses.
Sorry to interrupt, Dr. Moses. Can you turn on your mic? Apologize.
Dr. Moses, you are in mute, Dr. Moses.
Ooh, I am so sorry. There I am. Yay. I was saying that y'all have done a lot of really hard work going through the Racial Healing Handbook. We're in chapter 9, which is around allyship. And this is a really important aspect, especially when it comes to your work, the work of this commission. Allyship can be something that is positive, is just so supportive, is able to make the work move forward, and it can also create really toxic work environments. So I would love, from your perspective, how do you define racial allyship? How do you define it after having done the reading? Yes, Commissioner Lavisa.
Sure, I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you so much, Dr. Moses, for being here and starting this conversation and leading us through this conversation, because these are really hard conversations to have. And yeah, I was just thinking about allyship, because I was kind of thinking a little bit about like friendship, mentorship, camaraderie, community, like communalism. And I think I started to think like that, for me, allyship indicates that there is this like mutual, like reciprocal relationship between people, as opposed to there being like an extractive relationship between people. And it's like, I think we all know that feeling of like, you're getting a phone call from somebody and it's like, okay, why is this person calling me? Is it because they really care about me and they want to hear from me and they care about like how I'm doing? Or is it because they like want something from me or they need me to do something for them? And yeah, and I feel like that's not allyship. Like that, it still feels like an extractive relationship. So I would say at the very least, like if there is some sort of an extractive thing going on, that's like kind of like one way, and like it's in that power dynamic, that's kind of like a red flag for me that it's like not a good like allyship situation.
Thank you so much for that, Commissioner Lovisa. Can you give us, or anyone, give us some clues to allyship that works and clues to allyship that hasn't worked in your experience in the past? Some indicators of allyship that works and indicators when it's not really working. Commissioner Connie.
And some examples that I have seen or experienced of allyship working is when like in a work or in a professional setting, if like a manager or someone that's in a higher position chooses to sort of like operate or work in like a solidarity or an unlearning with the a group that's not as powerful or represented in that that kind of leadership, I think, can be seen as allyship. And I don't know if that's right, but and then examples of it not working is when people to do like uses the same professional kind of circumstance don't necessarily like align or listen or try to like unlearn or evaluate from the place of the more sort of marginalized group in some kind of conflict or something. So to me, like real allyship is like just constantly like unlearning sort of these systems and like looking and reevaluating these systems of oppression that we live in, and like understanding like the privilege or sort of like hierarchy or power that someone might have, and then trying to operate in a position of like solidarity or understanding or support with like the group that isn't as represented.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. So rich, and it really allows us to be able to step in and understand. I'm excited to hear from Commissioner Charlie and then Commissioner Faith.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Moses. Something that there's that saying that says, I didn't know I cared until I did, or something like, or until I knew what was happening around me. When I first started getting involved in this recent movement starting after George Floyd's murder, I noticed that I'm surrounded by a lot of so-called white allies, and also within the structure as well, not just out in the streets. But what I wasn't recognizing right away is some of the white folks that want to attach themselves to me as a person of color, to elevate themselves, and to start picking out, how can I say, like wanting me to teach them my ways, my language, my my indigenous secrets, whatever. And how when I kind of pushed back on that and asked them, to tell me more about their ancient ancestry, the reaction isn't what they wanted, right? They wanted to use my indigenousness and that's the best way I know how to explain it. If I wasn't Indigenous, would they give me the time of day? And so it's very challenging.
I'm seeing some heads nod here, Charlie. Yeah.
Yeah,
and it's like, oh yeah, yep.
I call it, we call it in the Indigenous community identity theft or attempted identity theft. And so, yeah, that's been very challenging. It's like they don't have their own ancient ancestral culture to fall back on. It leaves an emptiness, so they come searching for ours. They come after ours. And
in an extractive way.
yes,
Right?
yes.
You're going to use your knowledge to make their life better, not to
Right.
make your life better.
Yep.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you for that. Commissioner Faith.
Yeah, I was thinking about times that I've felt supported by allies, and I can remember in school, in grad school, my colleagues noticed that one of the classrooms we were in was in a building that didn't have an elevator, and I'm a wheelchair user, and I didn't notice before we arrived. And my colleague emailed me and just said, hey, I noticed that this classroom is upstairs and there's not an elevator. I would be happy to say something, but want that to be up to you. And, you know, I took care of it. And I think that example for me is that allyship really centers like the self-determination of the person who they're supporting, rather than like paternalism or someone taking care of, but really prioritizes the agency and decision-making of the person who has been historically oppressed. And I've seen some allies do a really good job of that. And I think folks can feel defensive when they're trying to be a really good ally, but it feels paternalistic and then are called out about it. And I think that's a really tough one to navigate for folks of color. Is how to hold that conversation.
And Commissioner Ajay, I see your hand. 1 second. Commissioner Faith, let's follow on that. When stepping in to interrupt, whether it's you needing to interrupt to say, you know, no, I don't need your paternalism, or you interrupting when you're seeing somebody else needing help and experiencing a microaggression. What are you feeling personally when you're in those situations? What's going on in your body?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of tension. And I think oftentimes it's the balance of, do I want to ignore this right now to like accommodate someone else, or do I need to pay attention to myself? And oftentimes when you're paying attention to yourself, it's really vulnerable. And so while someone's perceived good deed is aiming to be in support, it often can create more harm, because then you're put in a position of feeling really vulnerable or having to say, explain yourself, or to explain why that's not good allyship. And I think folks of color, I can't speak obviously for all folks of color, but I feel like I'm in teaching positions all the time, and it's tiring.
Yes, absolutely tiring. And they're trying to do their best, right? It's great intentions, but I think you're bringing a really critical point that that good intentions can be harmful to the person that you're trying to support. And being in relationship is so critical, like that person contacting you before and giving you the choice, the agency to decide what you wanted to do with it. So thank you so much for that example. Really tangible example. Commissioner Ajay.
So one thing I've seen with with good allies is that they are ready and willing and easily giving grace to people of color. So there's not like this need to like switch to focus on the white person's need at any moment, assuming that the ally is a white person, because there's different types of allyship. So, you know, whatever. But you know, so I'm thinking specifically of, for example, if I have, you know, a boss that's like a white woman and I feel like she's oppressing me, and I come, you know, after to go out for some drinks or something with friends after work, and I'm like, man, these white women, they think this and that or whatever, and I'm just like blowing off steam. I mean, this is something that often happens with people of color. Like when we're blowing off steam, we're talking about, you know, these white people that we think are oppressing us, and we might say, you know, white women this, or white men are like this, and you know, someone who's not an ally would take that personally and would make it about them, and they would you know, correct them maybe and be like, not all or whatever, or even a more neutral case, for example, where somebody speaks in AAVE or they speak in Jamaican patois or something, you know, and they're not necessarily speaking the Queen's English. And, you know, the person's like, no, you're supposed to say it like this. It's like, no, that person has their own way of communicating, which is perfectly fine and should not be corrected. And just because it's technically wrong according to dominant culture doesn't mean that it's wrong. So like good allies understand that like the way that we exist as people of color, especially as Black people, is one of like, quote unquote, like deviance, like deviance against a norm. And so they're not trying to hold us to this like norm that was never made for us. And so we're like given grace to show up in the ways that suit us best without having to feel like, oh, I gotta like walk on eggshells because it's like white person doesn't get it, you know? So that's like a huge thing in terms of like allies I've seen, in terms of the people that are like the opposite of that, you know, or like failing in allyship. I've seen this so often in Portland where like, you know, white person has this like great relationship with like one person of color, and they weaponize that relationship against another person of color. And they think just because they have this one strong relationship, and therefore they can talk down to this other person or critique this other person or punish this other person because like they have this like, you know, amazing perspective as an ally. And so they're weaponizing the relationships with some people of color against others. And I feel like that happens so often, and it's like the most like aggravating thing ever. And on the other side of that, sometimes you see people like really enabling people that are people of color. And so there's like a level of grace that, you know, I think that people should be shown. And also, you know, we are human beings in relation to each other, and we can't just excuse really bad behavior just because, you know, somebody is suffering under oppression, you know. They don't have the right to take that on others. So I've also seen in Portland where they're like enabling like people that are like treating others very poorly, like for example, will enable like a Black man to treat Black women or like Black queer folks like really terribly. And like that's not allyship. Just my thoughts.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you, Commissioner Ajay. Thank you. Have you ever had the opportunity to be an ally, but you didn't step in and you didn't interrupt the racist joke, or you didn't stop that comment? Why didn't you do that? What stopped you from being an ally? Commissioner Angie.
Yeah, I have. And I think there's a lot of people that have been in that situation. And I think that those situations happen in my professional life way too often. And putting yourself, you know, when you're at work and and it's about your career, it's really hard to be that, to be that when you hear somebody say that joke or whatever it is. And actually one time it was actually geared at me, and it was gross. It was really gross, but being a woman, a Hispanic woman in a scientific career, I can't always, I don't feel comfortable stepping up, even defending myself sometimes, you know, so.
So that is, and I'm so sorry that you experienced that, Commissioner Angie. What could happen inside the organization that would make it safe enough for you to be able to step in and say, hey, that hurt, that didn't land right, what, you know?
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I think that I really think that organizations need very strong, they need strong leaders to lead and show that this is the way it needs to be. You know, I think I think that really comes from the top down, at least in the organizations that I've worked in. It comes from the top down. It's not going to be middle up. It's not going to be middle sideways. It's not going to be sideways leadership. It's going to be top down leadership. And I was not feeling that when I was when that was happening. So you know, and to that end, it's really funny because I will step in front of a speeding car for a less experienced woman in my career, I feel like now, but back then I really felt vulnerable. So
Yeah, thank you so much. Power dynamics around maleness, around and the power that you now have because of longevity, because of the relationships that you have, you feel like you can step in for somebody else. And sometimes it's so much easier to step in for somebody else than it is for yourself. I'll speak for myself. I'll use I statements. That's how I feel. That's how I have experienced my allyship of stepping in for other people, and just sometimes it's just I've just whiffed it and didn't notice that actually that was, you know, whatever it was microaggression. So there's internal learning from a BIPOC position, from a Black woman position, that I still need to understand sometimes in order to see what the dynamics are that are actually really happening. How can this information, how can this conversation inform the commission's work? Bringing it home, bringing it home. Commissioner Faith, and then Commissioner Connie.
Yeah, I'm kind of, I know we're going to talk about some of the community Q&A sessions. But I'm really aware of, as we move into a little more public facing work, that how important it is to be allies to one another. Our last community Q&A session was really rough, and being able to hold space for comments that could affect our colleagues more than others feels critical. And I'm thinking a little bit of what you mentioned, Commissioner Charlie, around just our positionality and mindful of relationships. I think that it could be very easy to be like, well, I'm affiliated with this group, the Police Accountability Commission. That gives me some street cred in this space. And I'm mindful of that myself, of like, this is a position to power, or closeness to power, that many of us have never been in before. This level of decision making, this level of visibility. And I think in acknowledging the proximity to power that many of us for the very first time are holding, what are ways that we're holding that responsibly? So I'm just mindful of those things.
Thank you, Commissioner Faith. Commissioner Connie.
As we think about what the sort of intention of the work that we're doing on the commission is, it's like, I think we can sort of equate it to the idea that we're building like supportive allyship to people that haven't had a voice in these circumstances, or, you know, against the police in the past. So, you know, when we bring it into our work, like, I think it's one of the most important sort of components is like the idea that we're building, you know, this support, this listening, this unlearning, this like relationship based trust and sort of accountability that hasn't really existed. So I don't know, that's how I think I would like sort of equate it.
I really want to underscore the unlearning. You've said it like 3 or 4 times today, how unlearning is so critical to successful movements, and that this commission is really a movement to do something different. So just wanted to highlight that and say thank you so much. Any other wrap-up considerations around allyship within the commission, facing outwards or internally as a group? Commissioner Charlie.
Yeah, and I've done this before, but I think it's so important, you know, that we recognize our allyship to one another in creating this, but also the constant reminder of our values. I feel like we should like be aware of those each and every time we come into this into these meetings, not just as a full commission, but in our subcommittees and with one another. Sometimes it feels like we get off track of those values of equity and inclusion and anti-racism, harm reduction, transparency and trustworthiness, community-centered, and effectiveness.
Thank you for reading them again,
Mhm.
Charlie. Thank you so much. All right, it's 7:12. I want to turn this back over to our wonderful facilitator, Victoria, to continue on. Thank you so very much for your vulnerability and your participation this evening. Just such great wisdom in the room, and I truly believe that. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Moses. I speak also an I statement, as I always enjoy and get inspired by your trainings, and I really appreciate it. Thank you very much for sharing your amazing knowledge and amazing person with the commission. Thank you. And now we're gonna go to the next item on the agenda, and it is the reports. Each reports will have around 5 minutes, and we will hear about the subcommittee's work and also the community engagement. The first report will be by co-chair Charlie and co-chair Dan, and it will be about subcommittee on officer accountability. I will pass it to co-chair Dan and co-chair Charlie.
Okay, I think that we agreed I was going to do this presentation. I didn't realize this, but our last meeting of the full commission was on December 8th, so it's been a while. And our subcommittee met three times formally and then many more times informally between then and now. We had a work session on Saturday, December 10, where we actually broke into 2 subgroups and tried to split up part of our rough outline came back together. I think it might be a good model for us to use later down the line as we're doing this organizing, as we're putting everything together. So we it was one Zoom call. Well, it was really 2 Zoom calls. But we would come back together after every hour just to check in and say, hey, what do you guys come up with? What do you all come up with? And then we could go back and break back into the breakout rooms. And that way, if any big questions came up, that we could share that information back and forth. So it was a long afternoon, a 3.5-hour meeting on a Saturday. And then on a Monday, the 19th of December, we came back with questions that came out of that work session, and we tried to make it so it would be easier to get through those questions without having the full document in front of us, but that didn't work out too well. But we did make some progress. But so then, as a means to try to get us close to our final document that we're going to present to you all to vote on soon, we did a lot of little work sessions between then over the holiday season, where co-chair Michelle Wesley and I were, I think, at all of them together, maybe one or two where we weren't both there, but most of them we were both there. And then the various other members of the subcommittee would join us. So we never had more than 3 people there, so it was never a public a quorum. We weren't making any decisions. We're just kind of trying to work through this draft so that we could build an outline that then we could bring back to the full subcommittee. And that's what we did. We ended up breaking it into basically, but when we broke into the 2 work groups on December 10, we ended up breaking the document into 2 halves just because it was easier from a logistical standpoint not to try to put them back together. So now we have these 2 half documents that have that are more in an outline shape. They're much closer to what we're going to present to you. And we're having another meeting coming up on this Saturday. There's going to be 4 hours long. It starts at 2 and goes till 6. If anyone wants to observe that and chime in during it, we more than welcome you to be there. It was added at our request so that we can try to get through that whole outline. And I also want to do a quick shout out to Commissioner Aiken, who helped us by creating a flow chart of the proposed system. So, I guess I should back up a little, say the Officer Accountability Subcommittee is working on what happens from the time that an incident occurs to the time that an officer may or may not get disciplined at the end of that. So it's just basically the workflow of what's going to happen if somebody makes a complaint or if the system starts investigating a case without a complainant filing a complaint. So that's where we're at, and I'm hoping we'll get as far as we can on Saturday. I'm hoping that one extra meeting we have on the 30th, that maybe our subcommittee will have access to that date for our final meeting to get that to you all. Do you have anything to add, Co-Chair Michelle Wesley?
I guess the only thing I would add is that, yeah, we are on part 2, but we're only on page 5 of 27 pages. We still have the rest of findings. Then we have discipline, appeals, and mediation to get through. So yeah, we still got our work cut out for us. That's it.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all the work you're doing. Now I will pass it to the subcommittee on the structural oversight, and I will pass it to the co-chairs Debbie and Faith.
So Faith and I agreed I would give the recap tonight. And so the structural oversight subcommittee, most of what we're responsible for relates to policy. How does the new oversight board interact with policy recommendations and both based on complaints and just studies, that kind of thing. So and then there's several other things. There were kind of 9 topic areas that were assigned to us. So we have a document now that's, in kind of rough form, but it's got pretty much covered all of the topics. And we're just kind of adding and refining. And then this weekend, we hope that it'll be in good enough shape for Samir to send out to the subcommittee, so that will be people, if they have time to read it ahead of time, would be great, because we have a meeting Monday night that starts at 6:30, where we're going to continue on with reviewing the document, making sure we got all of this, everything covered in the way that we want to cover it. And then right now there's another meeting after that on the calendar. We'll see, where things stand at the end of Monday night. But thanks to everybody who's, pushed ideas into the basket. And I feel hopeful. We don't have nearly the volume to cover as the Officer Accountability Subcommittee. So our task is a lot more limited, which is I'm grateful for. And I have a feeling probably Co-Chair Faith is too. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Co-Chair Debbie, and thank you, Co-Chair Faye, for all the work you're doing. Thank you very much. Now I will pass it to Austin for the staff for community engagement.
Hi, everybody. Austin Foster, she, her pronouns. I'm the Community Engagement and Communications Coordinator. I just wanted to give y'all a brief update since we haven't had an update in a while. As you all know, we did have a community engagement Q&A session last Tuesday evening, the 10th, at the Center for Equity and Inclusion. We had 34 at my last count, community members present. We had to keep adding chairs. It was great. We had 7 commissioners there, which was amazing. Thank you all for taking time to be there. It means a lot to me. And then we had 4 of our staff there. Overall, I think it was a good conversation. There was lots of questions answered, lots of dialogue. And I sent out notes to y'all today. So feel free to look through those and you know, let me know if you have any questions. Or you can also reach out to the 7 commissioners who were there. Connie, Faith, Catherine, Obi, Sophia, Ajay, and Casey. And then I also, once I have the audio recording back, I'll be sending that out to y'all so that anybody who wasn't there can listen to that. A cool highlight, we had Amy there, the Associate Director of the Oregon Justice Resource Center, who we have been, Connie and Tirsa have been reaching out to, and that was amazing to have her voice there. The issue, she did bring up the issue of having trauma counselors there potentially again, and I want to let you all know that I've been looking for city training, but we are going to go ahead and start looking at community like training where myself and some of the other staffers could get trained on being like an informed trauma counselor. Since I will be at every community engagement event, that's just a skill I would like to get more training on. And then I did want to pass it over Obi, if you did want to give a brief little recap, maybe just some like high points for you of the night or something. I'm gonna try and be like maybe 60 seconds because I still have a lot of other things to do.
Sure, I'll make it quick. Hey everyone, Obi Agoju. I was at the meeting. It was the first in-person thing that I've been to as a part of the commission. I think it's good. I think events like this improve the validity of the PAC. Because we do serve the community at large, and it's great to have multiple voices. As Austin said, chairs were getting filled and more chairs are being added. I do think that there were multiple voices all over the spectrum that were there, and I think that's important to recognize. Like some of the work that we do, or some of the things that we're looking for are going to upset virtually everyone, like for people who are more on one side, more on the other. And I think not shutting out any voice, even though it might be hard to hear, or it might be antagonistic to us personally, or just the work in general. I think it's just important to like hear what people have to say and then use that user experiences, get as much information possible, and then take it into account as we do our work. But it was great to see you guys in person and look forward to things soon. But thanks, guys.
Thanks, Obi. And moving on, I do want to let you know about a community engagement, like kind of, I'm calling it a reporting tool that I'm working on, that will be coming to your inbox next week. It's kind of like a spreadsheet where we can start to use this for a quick reference from like community input this far, so that maybe like a catalog sort of, if you can think of it that way, so that the input and feedback that we received from the community, that's not just like a one and done, so that as you guys continue your important work that you're doing for the remainder of the year, then you can be able to kind of like just search in the spreadsheet to be able to say like, okay, you know, like a sexual harassment complaint or something with police, like where can we see any community input we've had on that, and go to that section. So I'm going to try my best to organize that. Yeah, TBD on that. You'll have it next week. And then update on listening sessions with community groups. Co-chair Christian and I attended the Apano community safety meeting where we were able to tell them about the commission's work. And we are excited to possibly partner with them in the future for a community listening session. Christian, CMOB, and myself are working on getting that event locked down with them, and we'll let you know when we hear back from them. And then we also sent over to Don't Shoot PDX and to the OJRC the requested items that they requested from us a little bit ago, and we're waiting to hear back on them about doing a community listening session with that group. So Connie and Tirsa and myself are working with me, or we're working on that community engagement event, and I'll let you know when we hear back from them as well and when we have a date locked down. We still haven't had any responses back really from the NARA or Wisdom of the Elders. So if anyone has contacts that we can reach out to, please pass them to Charlie, Faith, and myself, as we are kind of working on trying to lock down and get in contact with them so we can lock down an event with them as well. Lastly, trying to keep this quick. Sorry, Victoria. What is coming up? We have got OJRC. Thank you, Dr. Moses. OJRC is the Oregon Justice Resource Center, for those of you who don't know. What's coming up? We do have an interview coming up with Sam and Jasmine, with the co-chairs. They run KBU's Totality of Circumstances radio show. So that will be happening in the next couple of weeks, as well as an interview with KATU with the co-chairs. So just wanted to let you all know about that. And then we have our next community engagement session. It's going to be a virtual Q&A session on Tuesday, January 31st. So please help spread the word to your communities. And if you're listening in, we would love to have you there. That will be on Zoom. And lastly, I put it in the chat, but tomorrow there is a police accountability community group, like focus group session. It's going to be at Matt Dishman Community Center at 2:45 p.m. If you are able to sneak away and come, that is open to the public. So if you're watching this meeting and you would like to come, please drop in. This is for a call allocation study that the Community Safety Division is doing. So this is separate from the work of this group, but obviously closely aligns. It's about talking about alternative emergency responses, similar to like the Portland Street Response team. And so this is really important work, and we would love to have you there. It is just in person only. I did let them know that you know, hybrid would have been nice for a lot of folks, and there will be snacks and refreshments provided. So that is all I have, and I will turn it back over to you, Victoria. As always, feel free to email me or text me or call me with any questions.
Thank you very much, staff, for the report. There is 7:28. We're gonna take a short break before continue our discussion. I will pass it to staff.
Yeah, so sorry, I know that the full commission co-chairs had mentioned giving a little space at this time to debrief the content from the Tuesday listening session. So obviously we heard from Commissioner Obi, but can obviously hear from Commissioner Obi again, and anyone else who was there or just had questions about sort of the content area raised. That was a suggestion that was given to co-chairs that they wanted to try and implement before we just kind of in this time before we take a short break.
Okay, thank you. Is there any questions or comments about the content of the community engagement meeting? Yes, Commissioner Catherine.
Yeah, I just want to say that in the future, I thought Victoria did an excellent job, but I felt like we needed additional facilitators to really be able to manage the the folks that were there. I mean, we did talk about our community agreements and asked people to adhere to them, but some people did not. And I think one way of managing that would be, to have a couple of facilitators. One then is, trying to focus on and really try to work with people who are not in agreement with us, who are not abiding to those agreements, and another person could continue to make the meeting function. I mean, my sense is at both of the last two meetings I was at, we got the same feedback that it was not a space for hearing difficult truths, because, wasn't a space for trauma-informed listening. And I think it was, but my sense is it was from different angles. In the last space, I felt like in part because there wasn't adherence to our guidelines, I felt like it would have taken a lot of courage to speak up and speak truths in that environment, and feel like you might be subject to attack if you did. And that is absolutely contrary to our guidelines. And we can't have that. We can't, we're not going to get honest feedback. And we're certainly, if people are feeling that, they're feeling without even speaking, I think they're feeling some trauma. So I feel like we need to be considering, I think that the first meeting, we didn't have that issue. And I think people did speak up, but then when they spoke up, it was just such, a painful kind of rehash of an experience. I think we felt like, oh my word, somebody needs to be there to support them. So I just want to say that while we got the same feedback, I think it was directed at different dynamics. And I'm wondering if we could improve the dynamics of our last meeting around that, if we had it more heavily facilitated. So that's my comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Catherine. And I will pass it to Commissioner Charlie.
I was concerned about that same thing, Catherine, and that I was thinking some way of de-escalating those situations. Personally, I know too many people that would shut down with people who are being rather in disagreement, and probably maybe saying assertive is a light way to put it, but yeah, I'm thinking of just trauma informed and de-escalation. So people feel safe.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Charlie. And before I pass it, I want to pass it to Commissioner Connie.
Yeah, as a commissioner that did attend the last community engagement session, it wasn't necessarily safe, and it didn't feel trauma informed. And I am curious as to how we can, and maybe it would be easier on Zoom or something to be facilitated. And you did a great job, but in light of, a lot of voices and people that maybe aren't used to being facilitated, like how we can create that, open to all dialogues and, certainly, but not make it so it isn't feeling unsafe to be able to speak, from your specific vantage point. So I would say, as someone that is close with the people at OJRC and stuff, as we engage them in, having one of these community sessions specifically with their community, that is a question of concern, is well, how will these in the future be a little bit more trauma informed and safe spaces?
Thank you, Commissioner Connie. I will pass it to Commissioner Ajay. Commissioner Charlie, would you like to speak again? No? Okay, and then staff, and then we will take a break.
Yeah, I just want to say, I'm wondering if it might be helpful to set some, there were some people that I think they will get they might get activated in such a way that they, interrupt and they stop following the guidelines. But I also think that some people are not necessarily familiar with certain types of facilitation, and saying some things up front might manage expectations. For example, like saying things like, if you've already spoken, we'll likely skip you because we want to make sure we hear, a diversity of voices or something like that. You know what I mean? So people that aren't necessarily, used to like kind of an egalitarian form of like meeting, structure, they're not just thinking like, oh, this person's just skipping me because they don't like what I have to say, but they're like understanding that like part of how we function is that we operate in this way, and that might reduce some of the conflict, so people feel like they're not being like silenced, so they understand that the things that we're doing and they're for reasons and stuff like that. And the other thing I wanted to say was like there are so many different means of having discussions that are potentially full of conflict. Like there are a lot of different structures. I'm obsessed with facilitation. I've had God, I don't even know how many facilitation trainings. And one of the recent ones I went through is this thing called empathy circles, which has been really amazing. It's been really fascinating. I've had some very difficult conversations with people through them. And in fact, they've had like Antifa versus Proud Boys in these environments, stuff like that. So the worst of the worst in terms of like the most polarized viewpoints can be managed in this thing called empathy circles. And the idea is that there's a speaker, there's a listener, and then there's witnesses. And the only person that can speak is the speaker. And the listener is like reflecting back kind of like what the person is saying. And so in this environment, usually there's broken up into like 4 or 5 different groups, And so when somebody speaks, the listener is just repeating back, not saying their own personal beliefs, just repeating what they're hearing. And the other people are witnessing that. And anybody that wants to speak can speak when it's their turn because it functions in a circle. So, the listener becomes the speaker. So if the listener is like, okay, I want to respond to that, they can when it's their turn. And then they can't interrupt anybody. It's no shouting over each other, no talking over each other. And like in that format, that kind of rotating speaker, listener, witness format, everyone gets to say their piece. Nobody has to agree, but there's none of this like escalation back and forth, and so I just wanted to throw that out there as a potential option.
Yeah, no, thank you. And as there's a smaller number of people, and yeah, we will tell them, I told them they only can speak. Yeah, we give the rules, but that's thank you very much. There were 40 people, and I think we de-escalated enough. But yeah, we always, and the other 2 facilitators were sick and they got sick that weekend, but they wanted to go. That's the only reason I was by myself. I know staff wants to talk, but I need to pass it to, and it's the last commissioner. He's gonna talk, Casey, and then the staff, and then we need to go to break. Commissioner Casey.
Hi, sorry, I was having trouble finding my raise hand button. I completely agree that I think the facilitation was fantastic. I think the one thing that I think could potentially be helpful, just because I'm a very visual person, is having actually like a written sort of order of who has been called on and is going to speak next, because I think sometimes someone would speak so long that the next person would forget that who had been sort of listed, and so they'd get upset because they thought it was their turn, it was somebody else's turn. So I just think that might be helpful in keeping things organized, but I also think it's just worth acknowledging, at least in this most recent meeting, which is the only one I've been to as a relatively new person, but I think that there were some people who were there specifically for the purpose of disrupting the meeting and disrupting the work that we are trying to do. And I think that we will need to figure out as a group how we want to deal with people who have a difference of opinion and have input that may be different from what we believe, but are genuinely there in good faith trying to do something trying to advocate for their beliefs versus people who just don't believe in what we're doing at all and want to see us fail and want to create an unsafe environment for us to do this work in. And I will say, I mean, after the meeting, I went on Twitter and looked, and there were some people posting talking about how, you know, oh, I went there and, you know, there's a bunch of defund the police radicals and why are they even doing this work? And so I think that we will need to figure out how to create a safe space when there are going to be some people there who are deliberately trying to make it not a safe space.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Casey. Thank you very much. I will pass it to staff and then break.
Thank you. Just to mention the kind of the purpose of this debrief was to talk about content, and there were some really good questions raised about how the budget process will work. For example, there were questions raised about the way and the scope of the PAC and what the scope of the oversight board is. There was a lot of clarification given about the difference between administrative accountability processes and criminal accountability processes that might result. And there were probably several other topics that are going to be reflected in the notes that were sent out, as well as other materials, but just wanted to flag a couple of those things. And some of those are very relevant and pertinent to the conversations you'll be having in subcommittees. So just wanted to mention that. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, not to disagree, but to add to something Victoria said, you know, about why there were not other facilitators there. The city approved the scoring panel on September 15th for our facilitator under the RFP, and the PAC has been waiting for 4 months and 4 days for our new facilitators contracts to be approved. So as soon as that happens, we have 2 additional facilitators that will allow for, you know, obviously our current facilitators are fantastic. We're very happy to keep working with them, but they're not always going to be available for every event, especially at the pace that we're going. So as soon as those 2 new facilitators contracts are approved, which, you know, to give you an estimate on it would be not fruitful, because we've been given, I mean, dozens of estimates that keep getting pushed back. But as soon as we get that contract approved, which has been approved in all but the official bureaucratic part of it, then there are more to choose from. So yeah, that's something that staff's working on and following up on just about every day. So definitely trying to get their additional support for you and for your events through procurement. So thank you. I'll pass it back to take the room.
Thank you, staff. It's 7:42. We will come back at 7:50. Thank you. Thank you. Now we're going to resume the meeting, and we will start with the discussion. The draft of the PAC areas of agreement on access to information, which the subcommittee referred to the commission on January 5th. I'll now pass it to the co-chairs, Obi and Dan, to explain the document. Thank you.
Okay, hey again. Yeah, we staff earlier emailed you guys all the document for access to information, and it is set up into 5 different subgroups. The first is compelling, or the first is a slight introduction. We'll go through that pretty quick. Then we go to a compelling testimony, which regards the investigators and boards access to discussing testimony or compelling testimony with bureau members. Next, we will have, there's a subpoena power, which generally referred to the use of subpoena power for documents, videos, or information that was generally outside the scope of the bureau, but that was then, but we will see if there's been a slight change now. Then we move on to access to police records. A lot of this is based, and a lot of this whole document is kind of based on what's going on now, and then some slight tweaks based off of what we research, as well as what our IPR server some of the small deficiencies in what they have. But access to police records is exactly what it sounds like. Being able to improve the efficiency of investigations of complaints by accessing police records directly. Next, when we move on to data, which is a little bit of a grabble, but just kind of the handling of data, both physical and electronic, and how the board will do that in a safe and structured manner. And then lastly, we have the body camera footage, which is the bit of the hypothetical portion of the document, because currently the system does not have body cameras. I know this is being discussed. And in the backdrop of the next few months, we will figure out how this will apply, but we have recommendations for the board as well as generalized recommendations for city council to make sure that the board can be successful in regards to body camera footage. So yeah, Dan and I will go through it in a little bit, and then hopefully you guys can consider it. Thank you.
Victoria, you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you, Steph. Now we will move into discussing the draft areas of agreement on access to information. We ask you to follow our normal discussion rules. Please be brief each time you speak, even though you can speak multiple times. Please be facilitator and remember that we are now using a weighted stack in our discussions. Finally, please be forward-looking in your comments. Will the co-chairs like to get the discussion started? Thank you.
Sure. Well, I think what we'll do is now, if possible, go to, if there is discussion, that'd be great. But I think we will also go through each line. I think there'll be discussions on that one. Correct? Is that okay, Dan?
Yes, I think that's what we agreed to. So yeah, I think we should start with the overarching, the paragraph above, and then the bold text underneath it. You want to do that, or do you want me to do it?
You go ahead.
Okay. So just as an introductory paragraph, this has been added in. The Police Accountability Commission is tasked with developing the functions of the new police accountability system in Portland, including the new Community Police Oversight Board. As part of ensuring the Oversight Board and staff will be able to complete their other duties, the Commission was also tasked with ensuring the Oversight Board and staff have sufficient access to information to complete their duties. And so the big bold header here is the Oversight Board shall have the authority to obtain information to administratively respond to allegations of misconduct and conduct structural oversight effectively. Do we want to discuss that and try to agree on it before we move on, or?
What I can ask, yeah, let's go to discuss this before we move on. And I will ask this question. Is there any comment or any change of the wording on this particular part of this document that you would like to suggest? Or do you have any specific questions about it? If there's no discussion, we can move on. Okay, let's move on. Thank you.
Okay. So bolded statement number 1, the Oversight Board shall have the authority to obtain information to administratively respond to allegations of misconduct and conduct structural oversight effectively.
Is there a questions, comment, or discussion about this part? No. Can we move on? Okay, we can move on. Co-chairs?
Do you want me to do this? Okay, that's actually fine. Thank you. And I forgot to introduce myself earlier. My name is Dan Handelman. I use he/him pronouns, and I'm co-chair of this subcommittee as well as the Officer Accountability Subcommittee. Okay, so this section is compelling testimony, and it says, A1, the board shall have the authority and ability to compel all evidence during the course of an investigation. The board shall have the power to compel sworn members of the Portland Police Bureau and their supervisors to participate in investigations and to completely and truthfully answer all questions. And then we added this sentence that used to be in A4, we moved up here because it's basically saying the same thing in a different way. The board is authorized to direct Bureau members to cooperate with administrative investigations. And then underneath that, there's an explanation of where this stuff comes from. That the last sentence I just read comes from City Code about IPR, and then the first part is quoting from the charter, and all that stuff is just there that to sort of explain where this all came from. We don't necessarily need to read the record right now, and what we're hoping to do is take everything that's like this that just explains where it came from and put them into footnotes at the end of the document or at the end of each page, depending how we want to format it. And we were going to ask if people were okay with that. So I guess we should do two things. First, talk about the substance of that paragraph, and then ask about the footnotes.
Thank you. Then we will review the substance of the first page. Is there comments or questions? Yes, staff?
Yeah, just to clarify, it says first part of proposed change. The second part is the removal from A4. So this is moved up, just to clarify. So, you'll see down below here, when we get to A4, it says second part of proposed change. So just to clarify that particular comment, but the bolded section of A1 is what we're discussing right now.
Okay, thank you. Then the questions will be, is there, let's move to the question. Yeah. Is there a strong opposition to changing this part or in this part? No? And staff, do you wanna, oh no, sorry. Is there a general agreement to keep it as it's showing right now and keep the change? Yeah. Commissioner, oh yes, okay, thank you. Then we can move on to the next part.
Sorry, Facilitator Laura, can you ask if everybody's okay with us moving the footnoted stuff generally throughout the document into footnotes, so we don't have to ask that every time we come across a footnote? Okay, you want me to ask for the whole document? I think that's what we're talking about. Yes, thank you, Obi. Okay. Thanks, yes. Okay, then the question is, is there a strong opposition to add the footnote? I don't remember the last part. The footnote to the part.
Can I perhaps clarify?
Sure, yeah.
Sorry. So there are multiple items in here that as co-chair Dan mentioned are just references to text. Some of them show as a sentence and others show as a quote. Here's an example down below under this, about 2/3 of the way down. And so this would move all of those. They're all flagged as put in footnote. There are a couple items which are more opinion statements, which we might need a separate discussion on. More statements of views on the reference, but in terms of all the quoted items, they're all marked as put in footnotes. So they basically, the question for the commission is there strong opposition, and eventually is there general agreement to the idea that all the reference sections should be essentially moved into a footnote.
Okay, thank you.
Show these two examples as we go. There's one right here
and here.
Examples right here.
Okay, is there a strong opposition to move all the quotes and sentences to the reference, as a reference? Is there a general agreement to move this sentence and quotes as a reference? Okay, thank you. We can move on then.
Okay, so there's also there's other bolded text too, which is kind of alternative, I'll use that term since in there, an alternative plan. And this statement says, alternatively, the Bureau of Human Resources shall act on the board's behalf to compel the officer. And this kind of looks at the Bureau of Human Resources being the overarching people in control of city employees. And this is just another thing. If the board, I mean, in the statement beforehand, the board does have, and the new board would have the ability to compel the officer. But if not, there's kind of a backup to it because the Board of Human Resources is in control.
Okay, thank you, Co-Chair Obi. Is there any questions or comments? Yes, Commissioner Catherine?
I wonder if, are we saying if necessary as opposed to alternatively? I mean, is it, the way you explained it seemed to suggest that the board would have the authority, but if for some reason was unsuccessful, then could turn to the Bureau of Human Resources. So I'm just wondering if instead of alternatively suggesting that, you know, it could be an either or, that if necessary would suggest more of a hierarchy.
Staff?
Just to add to that question, I know co-chairs both were involved, but I think co-chair Obi was perhaps, this was maybe before co-chair Dan joined as a co-chair. So whoever, but there was a conversation at the subcommittee generally that applied to maybe 4 of the sections here about this exact type of question. So if perhaps the answer could be broadened to the choice of how to arrive at that. The subcommittee did discuss this exact question, so maybe helpful to explain sort of the philosophical rationale that applied to multiple parts of this as to why it's alternatively.
Thank you, staff. Co-Chair Obi or Co-Chair Dan, do you want to explain?
Dan, you want to go ahead and then we'll kind of.
Okay. Well, we did have a discussion about it. We had other language there that sounded too much like we were anticipating that the board was not going to have that authority. I think that Commissioner McDowell's suggestion is good, but I'm hoping that the folks who had concerns about how we phrase this would chime in and say whether or not they agree with it. I'll give it back to my co-chair.
Yeah, I think the wider discussion is currently in the system who has this power now, and I think it lies with, and correct me if I'm wrong, it lies with the police chief, which would be in this current city government usually, or currently the mayor as I'm sorry, the commissioner, the police commissioner, and police chief. So mayor and police chief, and then we are anticipating a change in city government too. But one thing that will remain certain is that there'll still be a Bureau of Human Resources that still is in charge of city employees. But yeah, the wording is changed because we didn't want to weaken the board status by writing something saying, oh yeah, we're going to go to another source to enforce this sort of thing. I think, judging that the city is going to try not to step in the way of the board and currently wouldn't step in the way of IPR, that it hopefully wouldn't even be necessary.
Thank you, Co-Chair Obi. For the rest of the commissioners, do you have more questions or should we continue the discussion? Because I can go and ask the question, is there a strong opposition to keep it as it is? Commissioner Co-Chair Dan?
I'm not strongly opposed to it. I'm just saying I think that unless anybody's opposed to it, I think we should try Commissioner McDowell's language that says if necessary, because I think that that is more clear instead of as she was saying, instead of making it sound like it's something that'll happen back and forth, only in the cases where it's necessary.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Then I will ask, is there a strong opposition to change it as if necessary instead of alternative? No. Is there a general agreement to change it and keep it as Commissioner Catherine? Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Connie? Oh, no, you just raise your hand to agree. Okay, thank you. We can move on.
Okay, I can do this one. So A2, a bureau employee shall attend investigative interviews conducted by the board, cooperate with and answer questions asked by the investigators during an administrative investigation.
Thank you. Commissioner Debbie?
So when I first read that, I thought maybe it meant the bureau employee would kind of attend, not the, and that's not the officer who's being investigated. Do you mean from this, do you mean the bureau employee who's under investigation shall attend the interviews?
Yeah, yes, I do believe that's what's mentioned or what's what we meant here.
Well, I may be the only one who was confused. So if it's just me, then you should just leave it the way it is.
Okay, Commissioner Co-Chair Dunn?
If Commissioner Michelle Wesley wants to go first, that would be fine.
Yes,
I was-
Commissioner Charlie, sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, that's okay. I know my hand is a different colors. Anyway, I was just going to agree with Commissioner Debbie on that because I often find when we're writing these things, we're assuming people know what we're talking about. So it's never good to assume. It should say who the bureau employee is.
Thank you, Commissioner Charlie. Co-Chair Dunn?
Yeah, well, the thing is, I believe this could be a witness officer as well. So I think it should say a bureau employee compelled under Section A1. And I don't know if there's probably a more artful way to say that. Yeah, that's good. That's it. Just leave it like that. Yeah, whose testimony is compelled shall attend. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, then I will ask the question, is there a strong opposition to changing, adding whose testimonial is compelled? Is there a general agreement to change it and adding this? Thank you. And Commissioner Casey, are you raising your hand because you want to make a comment or do you agree to the consensus?
Because I want to make a comment, but also
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, should I go now?
Yes, go ahead.
I was just wondering if there is any particular reason not to say answer questions truthfully in this section, other than that we just sort of, I mean, I don't know if it would be, how it would be enforced, but I feel like even making clear wherever we can that truthfulness is expected could be useful.
Thank you. And I can, yeah, Commissioner Catherine?
Yeah, and this is, I'm sorry, sometimes I'm a little slow to respond, but I wonder if we could say whose testimony is requested or compelled, because I assume, you know, there may be situations where, I mean, people might, misinterpret the word compelled as like it has to be forced. It can't be voluntary in order to have this apply. But so I appreciate that amendment, and then I also appreciated Commissioner Casey's proposal. I think it makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's okay. I will ask again, is there a strong opposition to changing and adding these changes to the statement A2? Requested and truthfully? Okay. Is there a general agreement to adding the words requested or and truthfully to the statement A2? Thank you. Then we can move on.
Continuing on with A2, so this is a kind of a branch point, but if an employee refuses to attend an investigative interview after being notified to do so, or refuses to answer a question or questions asked during an investigative interview, the police chief or appropriate city authority shall direct the employee to attend the interview and answer the question or questions asked.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Is there questions or comments? Yes, Commissioner Agi? Co-Chair Agi, I'm sorry.
I was just wondering if there might be like state law that like contradicts with this, or like bargaining agreements, just because like there's I know that like officers have a right against like self-incrimination. And so what if their right against self-incrimination goes against this, the questions that are asked or something like that? I don't know if that was something that was talked about at all in the subcommittee. Just curious.
Yes, thank you. I will pass it to Co-Chair Obi.
Yeah, so no, great question, fantastic. I'm glad we can actually nip this in the bud now. If we can you quickly scroll up to the top of the document, all the way to the top to like our definition, our one definition. So yeah, there is protections for this, and like I want everyone to think about this and the administrative side, but which is what we're kind of going over versus the criminal side. And yes, officers countrywide, they have the Fifth Amendment right to not self-incriminate, and that is constitutional law. But administratively, it's actually protected to be able to compel an officer to speak on an investigation. That's what the Garrity warning is, what it goes over. It allows appropriate authorities to compel testimony of an officer, and them not participating in a truthful or appropriate manner can lead to or up to terminate, can lead to punishment and up to termination. And that's been reaffirmed in different state laws as well. And in other cases we referenced, there can be minor crossover, if a investigative looks at things, if a criminal investigation looks at things that were said in this compelled testimony, it doesn't necessarily poison that well, even though they couldn't use it in their own situation. Yeah, it is absolutely possible to have this done. It's not, it stays legally above water.
Thank you, Co-Chair Obi. Is that answered your question? Oh, Co-Chair Dan? Mm-hmm.
Right. Well, I mean, this raises a very good point, which is what we define the Garrity warning in the top of the document, but I don't see it in this section anywhere mentioned. Is that something that the board has to do before compelling the officer's testimony? So unless I'm wrong about that, I'm trying to go back and forth between the Zoom meeting and my screen, but I mean, and the document, but I don't see Garrity in the body text outside of the definition. So I think we should probably add that in A2, after the end of the current last sentence, officers who are compelled will have a Garrity warning read to them. Shall.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And like definitely important to know, because that is, the rights allowed to, every officer statewide and federally.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Lovisa?
Sure, I'm really glad that we're talking about this, because Garrity warnings, clear Garrity warnings, are very important. It's quite common from the administrative investigations I've seen for the Garrity warning form to have a signature line, and for the subject officer or the witness, whoever is compelled, has to sign that they received it and that they understand it. So I guess I wasn't sure, if this comes up at any point, but I guess if we're adding in this language about receiving a Garrity warning, I guess I wanted to bring up, doesn't make sense to add language. I don't know if this is maybe too granular for this document, but language indicating that, they should sign to indicate that they have like received a Garrity warning.
Are you suggesting to add more language to this sentence, Commissioner Lovisa?
Yes, I am. I just I can't think of an artful way to do it. It's just like a piece of paper that allows you, when you go back over an investigation later, that piece of paper is often the only way that you know whether or not somebody received this Garrity warning before giving a statement. And it just helps clarify things a lot.
Yes, Commissioner Catherine?
So maybe we could address that point by just saying shall receive and confirm written receipt of a Garrity warning.
Okay. And Commissioner Charlie?
I was just wondering, why are we avoiding that they signed it? Or
What you suggest?
this is, yeah, just add that in there somewhere, that they actually, it only says that they received it and confirmed they received it. It didn't say they agreed to it.
Mhm. Would you suggest to add words there, some wording?
Officers are.
And you would like to add the word signing or agreeing to it? As you
Right. I just don't know where to put that. Receive a Garrity warning.
sign and
But they have to receive it and then sign it, right?
yeah, receive it, sign and confirm. Yeah. Mhm.
Receipt should probably come first, right?
Mhm. Receive, warning, sign, confirm and receive.
Receive a Garrity warning, sign, and signed confirming receipt. I guess that's close enough.
Thank you, Commissioner Charlie. Co-chair Dan?
I would say, and provide a signature to confirm they received the warning.
Mhm.
The warning, because yeah, we already said Garrity in the same sentence. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. That's a teamwork. Then I will ask again about this change to A2. And I will say, is there a strong opposition to changing and adding this sentence at the end of the bold part of A2? Is there a general agreement to change and adding? And I'm sorry, Commissioner Lovisa, are you agreeing or you want to say something?
I'm sorry, I wanted to say something. I guess I
Go
just
ahead,
was
go
looking at the language, and I wanted to clarify that it's really important that that signed Garrity warning happens before the testimony.
Okay.
So maybe officers who are compelled to testify shall receive a Garrity warning before the interview begins or prior to their testimony. Thanks. Yes, that works.
Thank you. I will ask again, is there a strong opposition to adding the last sentence to A2? Is there a general agreement to changing and adding the sentence of officers who are compelled to testify should receive a Garrity warning prior to their testimony and provide a signature confirming they have received the warning? Okay, thank you very much. We can move on. I need to ask, is there a question or comments on this point? No. Okay, then should I go to the whole A2 or just for the bold part? Or can we move on? I guess because there was no changes there. Yeah, Commissioner Dan?
Yeah, I don't know if we agreed to the second paragraph, but it hasn't read into the record. So yeah, if you want to confirm with everybody it's ready, time to move on, I think that'd be good.
Okay. Can we agree and move on for the second part of A2? Thank you. Thank you. I think we all agree. Oh, needs to be written. Okay, I can ask some. Can we agree and move on to leave this point of the second part of A2? Can we move on? Okay, thank you. A3.
Okay, my turn. Refusal to truthfully and completely answer all questions may result in discipline up to and including termination, which is noted is a direct quote from the charter.
Okay, is there a question? Commissioner Charlie?
I was just wondering, like, sorry to back you up a little bit, but are we gonna put truthfully every time we talk about them answering questions, because it isn't in the last paragraph, but it is in the one before, and now it's in this one. So I'm just like, is it assumed again that they should always be truthful, or do we need to spell it out? Sorry.
It's okay. As there is a question for the commissioners if they want to add.
Well, I feel like it's covered because the first part of A2 says they have to answer it truthfully. So I think anything after that is it's already covered by that. It's the an umbrella that says everything they do has to be truthfully answered. So I think we're okay on that.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Dan. Co-Chair Dan. Now we can continue reviewing A3. Is there any question or comments? Then can we move on for the A4? Okay, thank you. We can move on.
A4, as a separate source of information for the board's administrative investigations, the board shall have access to the Bureau members' statements from a criminal investigation, as well as relevant police reports.
Is there comments, questions? Commissioner Co-Chair Dan?
I'm just seeing some language that we want to tweak to make it more clear. As a separate source of information for the board's administrative investigation, the board shall have access to Bureau members, plural, S apostrophe, statements from any criminal investigation.
Okay. Thank you, Co-Chair. Then I will ask, is there any additional comments? I will ask Is there a strong opposition to changing and adding the changes to A4 that Co-Chair Dan suggested? Is there a general agreement to adding these changes to A4? Okay, thank you. We can move on.
Yeah,
This is
go
Bill
ahead.
this year.
Okay, I read it. Compelled testimony can be done in an in-person or in a virtual setting.
Just to speak on that, that was one of this is the original thought, and it might be done at times, but one of the difficulties that IPR stated when they talked to our subcommittee was that it is hard to get the 7 people necessary for a meeting to all be in one spot, including the bureau member, a member from IA, a union representative, an IPR investigator, and a couple others. That's difficult. So for portions of this, it would be reasonable to have some things done in a virtual setting. One thing to consider that Co-Chair Dan and I talked about is that we are not trained investigators, and trained investigators might say, well, for specific portions, in-person means more to the validity of an investigation. I completely understand that. But if there was some portions of it that could be more efficient by doing virtual, I think that's well worth stating.
Thank you, Co-Chair Obi, and I will pass it to Commissioner Casey.
Yeah, I think Co-Chair Obi sort of covered my concern, which is that I do think there are sometimes genuine investigatory purposes for having in-person interviews. I know this is sort of that there's going to be more work done on this in the future, but just looking over it kind of as a legal document, I think either now or in the future, it would be good to outline under what circumstances and who can request that these be done in a virtual setting. Is it just if anyone involved in the process says I'd prefer virtual, it happens, or can certain people request it? And if so, do they need to show some kind of good cause for the request before it happens? Just one of those fiddly things that my brain alights on when I see language like this.
Thank you, Commissioner. Do you have any specific suggestions to add into the text?
So I think it probably merits more discussion between commissioners, but I think I would say something along the lines of like X party can request compelled testimony to be done virtually if the board finds that there is good cause to do so.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Aye?
Yeah, I was when I hear the phrase like can be done, like I think about sort of being given a choice, and that's not really like what's implied here. Like, the person whose testimony is being compelled is not presumably being given a choice about this. So I wonder if even just replacing it to be like may be done in an in-person or virtual setting, depending on the specific guidelines set by the future commission or something, because I don't know if we want to get in the weeds about like because like, Commissioner Obi said, like, you might not really have the information to determine like what setting is right. But we want the future commission to be able to determine that, but we don't want to imply that they can choose whether or not it's in person, like the compelled testimony person could choose between those settings, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Aye. And I saw CMAP, Commissioner CMAP, and I will pass it to you since we haven't heard from you.
Greetings, everybody. Actually, I was thinking along Commissioner Ajay, and so, yeah, I would support and echo that. If even say will be done in something even more assumptive of the process that must move forward rather than giving it an option. But I second Commissioner Ajay.
Thank you, Commissioner Sima. Co-Chair Dan?
Well, I don't think, I think what we should do instead is add at the end of the sentence, when the board deems it appropriate. So compelled testimony may be done in person, yeah, when the board deems it appropriate. And I also think we should say compelled or requested testimony. I liked what Commissioner McDowell said before. We might want to change this entire section heading to be compelled and requested testimony, so that, you know, the officer should voluntarily do it without having to be compelled. This will cover that too.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. If there is no more additional suggestions, I will move to ask the question. Is there a strong opposition to changing A5 and adding the words that's now at the statement? Requested, may, and when the board deems it appropriate. Is there a general agreement to adding these words to the A5? Yes, thank you. Then we can move on to A6.
I think I'll read this one because I want to give the last one to Co-Chair Uju. In addition to investigator interviews, compelled testimony of sworn officers can also be done, may also be done in a hearing of the board in which the community members on the board will have direct access to the officer. And underneath that is that we wanted to add, this was not in the last draft, as with section A1, and probably we should say, if necessary, same with the same edit, the Bureau of Human Resources shall act on the board's behalf to compel.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan. Is there a question or comment? No? Okay. Then I will move to ask the question. Is there a strong opposition to changing A6 where the word may and add changing as A1 if necessary? To the Bureau of Human Resources shall act on the board's behalf to compel the officer. Is there a general agreement to change and add the word may to end the sentence at the end? Okay, thank you very much. We move to the next one. Co-Chair Obi?
Yep. A7. Prior to being interviewed, a Bureau employee will be A, notified of the time, date, and location of the interview. B, informed of the right to bring a collective bargaining unit representative to observe but not take part in the interview. Read a statement that the employee is directed to attend the interview, cooperate during the interview, and answer all questions fully and truthfully. And if the employee fails to attend the interview, cooperate during the interview or answer any questions fully and truthfully, the employee will be subject to discipline or discharge. Provided with, and D, provided with any other information or protections required by any applicable collective bargaining agreement.
Thank you, Co-Chair Obi. Is there questions or comments? Okay, can we, there's no changes here. I mean, the footnote, but other than that, can we move on? Oh, Commissioner. Sorry, I see it. Thank you. I will pass it to Commissioner Lovisa and then Commissioner Charlie. And then Co-Chair Dan.
Sure. So I think this would be a good time to clarify that the officer is, that this is an administrative investigation, and we could bring some of that Garrity language down here or include the Garrity warning. Sometimes after an incident, you're going to be interviewed by both an administrative and a criminal investigator. So it's just like very important that it's clear that this is an administrative investigation, that you are going to be compelled to testify, and that testimony cannot be used against you. And that's what that Garrity warning is for.
Thank you, Commissioner Lovisa. And I will pass it to Commissioner Charlie.
I'm really tired, so maybe I missed something, but I'm wondering, I thought that we were using the word member for police officers, and now we're using member or officer or employee. So I'm like a little confused
Okay.
that it's not consistent.
Mm.
Or does that not matter? I don't know.
Okay, let me pass it to co-chair Dan and then to staff.
Well, I don't really have an answer to that issue. I think I agree we should be consistent if we can, but I don't know how much it matters. I think we took this language directly out of city code. But in terms of two things about what's now letter C, staff, it's supposed to be read a statement, so that it's not the officers reading the statement, that the person doing the interview is doing it. So it should be read a statement. And then I think that should be split into two parts. It can stay as one letter, but say, answer all questions truthfully, period. If the employee fails to attend the interview, and I think that's why we had trouble reading it into the record. So the and can go away.
Thank you, Co-chair Dan. And staff?
Yeah, so there's a similar bureau employee whose testimony is requested or compelled is what the edit is here that might help fix the header here. But as Co-chair Dan mentioned, there are multiple bodies of law which are cited here, and they often use different terminology, bureau member, bureau employee as well. So if, in order to be consistent, it would be whose testimony is requested or compelled would be the text that was approved in A4. Just wanted to mention that. Does that answer the question? I'm not sure if it does.
Does that answer your question, Commissioner Charlie? Yeah, thank you. Is there any more changing to the text for A7 or questions or comments?
Sorry.
Yes, Co-chair Dan?
So in the added D, it should be receive a Garrity warning prior to compelled testimony. Because if they voluntarily give up something that can be used against them, that's, if they're there voluntarily, that's just the way the ball bounces, I guess.
Yes, thank you. Any additional questions or add-ins or changes? Yes, Commissioner Catherine?
I just had a question, whether there is a right to bring, I was thinking it was a lawyer or a collective bargaining unit representative. I thought, and my recollection was that's what was required by the collective bargaining agreement, one or the other, but I could be wrong. And I'm wondering if Dan knows the answer, Commissioner Dan knows the answer, because this is something we were talking about also in the officer accountability context as well.
Yeah, well, it's true. We are delving into this a little bit more in the officer accountability group. I mean, and I think we can probably leave this the way it is because it says they're representative, and that if that attorney is provided, generally it's by the.
It could fall with the lawyer could be that bargaining unit representative, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we merge these all together, I think we can clarify all that, because we also in our other subcommittee we're talking about allowing the officer also bring a support person, and I don't, for the purposes of what we're doing here, the access to information, I don't think that's important. So, but maybe we can say the right to bring collective bargaining unit representative and or other support persons as allowed. Yeah. And that way we cover whatever we decide in the other subcommittee.
Okay. Thank you. Is there comments or questions? Can we go and review and for the questions, the whole A7 with all the changes? Okay, think so. Okay, let's add the question. Is there a strong opposition to changing A7 with all the suggestions and the letters that right now are in red and bold letters from the main statements to A to E? Is there a general agreement to adopt the changes that were suggested for A7, the general statements for the A to E? Thank you. We can move to the next one. Yes, Co-Chair Charlie? I'm sorry, Co-Chair Christian?
No worries. I just wanted to do a quick time check. It's 8:43 right now, so it's not looking like we'll finish this. I think we can keep going for a little bit longer, but just to let everyone know that it's getting a little bit later now. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much for doing that. Okay, now we can go to A8.
Yes, this is mine. So I just want to thank the Uber co-chair for bringing that in, and mention that maybe if it's okay with everybody else, unless we're maybe we should take a pulse of the group to see if we want to run a little late, but we could just finish this section A8 and A9. And oh wait, so before we do this, I would like to point out we're planning to swap the order of A8 and A9, and I think you didn't do that yet. Is that right, Sal?
Correct, we are not yet done.
Okay, so let's read A9 first, because it'll be first in the order that we're proposing. So a Bureau employee shall comply with the request for compelled testimony within 48 hours. We put in as a suggestion. And I think staff is highlighting for you that the current policy requires that to happen. That's written specifically around deadly force cases, but basically they are required to respond within 48 hours unless they're disabled by whatever the incident was that happened.
And Co-Chair Dan, just to understand, you're suggesting A9 will be 8.8 and then move 8.8 to A9?
That's what my co-chair and I are proposing. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Then since we read A9, let me ask, is there a strong opposition to move on for to approve A9 and to move it to be 8.8? Is there a general agreement to approve 8.9 and move it as a 8.8? Thank you. Let's move that and this now read 8.8.
A8, which is the new A9. In use of deadly force and death in custody cases, responding investigators shall have the ability to compel testimony once, compel or request testimony once the criminal investigators have completed their interview.
Thank you. Is there questions or comments? No. Is there a strong opposition to changing and leaving A as a A9 with the changes? Is there a general agreement?
Sorry, I had
Go ahead, Commissioner Lovisa.
I do think that this is a best practice. I just wanted to say, can we add the word administrative in between responding and investigators, responding administrative investigators. Only to differentiate it, because we say investigators and then we say once the criminal investigators have completed their interview.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any additional changes? Commissioner Lovisa?
No.
No, thank you. Okay, let me ask again, is there a strong opposition to changing now A9 and adding in death in custody and administrative? No. Is there a general agreement to add in those words? Okay, thank you. Do we want to continue or just to start B1, or do you want to go the next items on the agenda?
I personally, I'm like a, how does everyone feel type of person. So I'm personally okay with stopping here, but if anyone else has a really strong desire to continue to move, that's okay. I think we can go to about 8:50 or so, leave the last 10 minutes for the next one. So we have 2 minutes if someone wants to cover, if people really feel like they want to cover at least the first one of the next section, but I'm totally fine with stopping here. If my other co-chair feels differently, please let everyone know. That's fine too.
I do not feel differently. And I also want to just mention that and maybe this is my own bias, but I do feel like the energy is waning a little bit. So I think it might be a good time to move on.
Okay, let's move on for the next item on the agenda. Thank you very much. Okay, the next item of the agenda will be, is not the document. Okay. Is a public comment?
Apologies, it's not actually.
No, it's not.
That's later on in the agenda. I just.
Yes. Yeah, definitions.
So it appears we probably won't have time to really discuss this, but just to at least introduce the concept so that it's capable of being discussed at the next meeting. Just wanted to flag that there is a document. It's been circulated. It'll be circulated again and more references added. As we've discussed in the past, PAC is obligated to define several terms, many of which fall directly under one subcommittee, and some either don't fall under a specific subcommittee or fall under multiple, so they're being handled by the full commission. The two terms in this phase of work are accountability and independent judgment, and there's a proposed definition here and several references with relation to the accountability one, and then with relation to independent judgment, proposed definition here from Commission Member Dan, and reference to the charter. And so the idea is this provides a starting point, something to react to, something to add to. Please incorporate your suggestions, and if they're received by next Tuesday or so, they're able to be put in and circulated so everyone has a chance to read it. This is most likely the next thing that the commission would finish in this phase of work after the document that was just under discussion, the access to information document. As you can see, it's pretty short. It's just onto a third page right now, and you know, the references may end up being in footnotes. So but these are fairly important things, as one of the core components of it is to be able to define accountability in the context of the relationship between communities and the police. Yeah. Any questions on that, the process? Not necessarily content, since we don't really have a chance to get into that yet.
Yes, Commissioner Co-Chair Dan.
Right, I just want to say, I did both these drafts, and if you look at the second half of the accountability definition, I wrote more broadly because there's things that, you know, accountability includes, which are the new board won't have the authority over, like lawsuits. So I just wanted to, but I wanted to keep that in there as part of the definition of accountability. So that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Co-Chair.
And this item is on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay, thank you, staff. We will now take open public comment on the issues of the PAC is discussing, or community members can also tell their story about policing and police accountability. We ask members of the public to keep their comments or questions to 2 minutes in length and raise their hand in Zoom if you like to speak. We invite public comment and participation of the community now.
I do not see any raised hands, Victoria.
Thank you. Then we can move on to the next item on the agenda is members' curiosities. And I will pass it to the co-chairs.
All right, thanks. Member curiosities is a brief period of time on today's agenda and in general as well most agendas where members of the commission can bring items to discuss. This can be questions or follow-ups, it can be an article, can be anything pretty much. We're not going to vote on anything in this time. It's just to give space to members to share whatever you want to share or any questions you have that came up during the meeting. Keep it to about a minute or so per person so that we can wrap up and not have it blow up into a huge discussion. Okay, cool. Thank you. If anyone has anything to share.
Thank you, Co-Chair Christian. Commissioner Debbie?
So I just want to follow up on the community listening session recap. And I had asked the co-chair, the 3 co-chairs about putting this on the agenda. Just want to say how grateful I am that you did it. And it was really great to be able to hear some of your impressions and to hear Austin's kind of explanation of how things went. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Debbie. We'll appreciate it. Commissioner Catherine?
I just wondered if we had any additional insight on the request for an extension of our timeline. I know it got referred to the mayor's office, but at least as according to staff's update, we didn't really know what that meant. So I'm just curious if there has been any additional information gleaned about that and any sense of whether we are likely to get that extension or not. Thank you.
Thank you. And staff, would you like to answer or we just move on?
I don't think I have anything specific enough to share. There were some questions that got raised. I think we'll hopefully hear more soon. I'm definitely going to, continue to advance the PAC's request from December 8th for that extension to the city council offices. As part of our job as staff is to pass that along and keep talking about it. But nothing clear enough to, yeah.
Thank you. Is there any other questions or suggestions? No? Okay. Now we'll go open into suggestions, follow-ups, articles you have been read, or did you like to share or more? Does anyone have any other member curiosities? No? Okay, then for the phases of work transition task, I'll now pass it over to staff.
Thank you. So on the agenda, it has several things under the phases of work transition tasks. And so we'll just kind of walk through these pretty quickly here because several of them are if received and nothing was received. So that's to clarify here, just a moment. So first up was review of proposed changes if received in advance to the PAC bylaws and internal processes. We have an opportunity at the end or as we near the end of each phase of work to revisit those documents. There were no proposed changes received to the bylaws, so nothing to discuss there. There are no proposed changes to the internal processes, so nothing to discuss there. There was also nothing proposed to the PAC agenda and scope and nothing to discuss there. However, for that particular document, in the event that there is a change to the timeline, if members would like, they can we'll definitely have a revisitation of the agenda and scope if any member would like to as soon as we know a definitive answer to the timeline question, because that might be related. It might not be for you, but if it will just offer that opportunity one more time if that does come up. And then the last thing is the draft structure and details phase work plan and subcommittees for member feedback. And this we do have some information on. So this is a first run of talking through how the next phase of work will be structured. So as you know, this is the powers and duties phase of the PAC. It relates to the function of the system or functions of the system. The next phase of work is the structure and details phase, which is the it relates to the form of the new system. And so you've seen these slides before. This was how we organize the organizational phase. This is how we organize the fact-finding phase. And you can see there's over a course of months, a plan to get things out into a subcommittee and then back in. The way that we landed on it for this particular phase of work was to have 3 subcommittees for 3 outcome documents and have them all refer documents to the full commission. As of right now, one of those 3 documents has been referred, the Subcommittee on Access to Information, which we all know because we just were in this meeting as you discussed it at the full commission level. The other 2 documents are being developed still in the 2 subcommittees, Officer Accountability, Structural Oversight. This is sort of just the model of it, and part of what we're doing here is this exact thing of giving feedback to the draft work plan. It's the first transition task. Looking ahead to the structure and details phase, this is what the agenda and scope talks about in the document related to that. There's board membership, there's selection and replacement of board members. And this is what the commission approved in the September 15th version of the agenda and scope, just to clarify. There's also the staff of the new board and the position within the city, which includes budget, office, and where in the city's org chart should be housed. And then there's a larger section on public access and transparency, as well as reporting. So the access to information document, for anyone who may be watching and wondering what this is very focused on the board's ability to get information, but what about the public's? That's coming up in the next phase, and that's a very large part of it. So as a result, it doesn't specifically define these as 4 different outcome documents, but it does say that areas of agreement should cover these items: board membership, staff, office, bureau, and board agency budget, and reporting, transparency, and public access to information. Having 4 subcommittees is something that came up, and from a project management perspective, does not make a whole lot of sense just because of the timeline. So looking together at combining what was the staff, office, bureau, all the sort of administrative backend into an oversight agency side of things is the proposal here. Still keeping board membership together and reporting and transparency together. And so this is all of that is to lead up to a proposed work plan, which relates to the structure and details phase. So as you can see, this is almost the exact same as the org chart, or sorry, I should say the flow chart for the powers and duties phase. In fact, clicking on them quickly might make very little of it change. But there's a segment on board membership, oversight agency, which again would include all the staffing structure as well as office, budget, and city org chart. And then transparency and reporting could be public transparency and reporting. It just didn't fit into the box there when I tried that. So that's essentially the first draft, and then you can see everything still continues to be referred to the full commission for approval, and we go into the transition and have the prep for the phase after that. So that's sort of the initial project plan draft. We'll open it up for feedback in just a moment. I did want to mention, and this slide is exactly the same from when we talked about the proposed structure for this phase of work as compared to the one that came before, which is that because there's 3 subcommittees, there's a higher level of lean towards subcommittee meetings, which creates more options for members to manage their own schedule. in terms of going to other subcommittees if they're interested. Each subcommittee only has one outcome document, which is something we're doing right now. And you can compare that to the previous phase of work and see how that has helped to keep the subcommittees closer in timeline to each other. If there's definitions to draft, those would be at the full commission as well. Briefers and testifiers can go to subcommittees, so it doesn't all have to be at the full commission. And yeah, that's the main takeaways there. And I'll just put this, the next slide says member feedback open, but just to help kind of illustrate, I'll keep this slide visible for a little bit and then open the floor up if folks have initial thoughts and feedback. This is not a final version. This is not a final decision. This is something that would be revisited, but this is a first opportunity. And when we get to discussing who the co-chairs should be and eventually selecting, when the members select who the co-chairs will be for the next phase of work, they'll also be involved in helping to plan the details around this. So just I'll show these two slides again for about 15 seconds each and then open the floor up. This is the flow chart. And then this is the list of the outcome documents for the next phase. And I should say structure and details, apologies.
Is there any questions or comments? Yes, Co-Chair Dan?
Well, just for the record, we had the same presentation when we're getting ready to do this phase, and it was said that that was a first draft and we'd come back to it, but in the next meeting where it was discussed, it was stated that was finalized. So I just want to make sure that that we do have it come back if people want to discuss it further. And my concern about the last phase and this phase is that I feel like a lot of community engagement events are happening, and maybe there are some commissioners, it seems, that are helping with those kind of on one-on-one basis, but it doesn't seem like it's real organized from within our commission. And I kind of feel like when we lost the community engagement subcommittee, we lost a coherent strategy among us, we commissioners, about what we're doing with community engagement. So I just want to think about that. I'm not, trying to say I disagree with that structure that was proposed to us, but I'm also, I want to make sure that we all don't lose sight of that really important part of what we're doing, which is listening to what the community wants us to do. Thanks.
Thank you, Co-Chair Dan.
Does anyone else have any thoughts that they'd like to share on the areas of agreement or proposed work plan? And then I have one comment as part of the wrap up on this topic too.
Yeah, Commissioner Catherine?
Yeah, I just had a couple of thoughts, and one is whether the executive leadership, how the director is selected, appointed, the accountability of that person, whether that, I just want to pose the question of whether that maybe should go with the board membership committee, just because it's really the leadership. And that's always such a sensitive issue, to whom the leader of the organization reports. So that's one thought I had. The other just thing I wanted to flag is that I think potentially based on the recommendations of the Officer Accountability Subcommittee, there may be a proposal to create a hearings function within the Oversight Board, and I assume that would go within the staff subcommittee, but I just want to flag for that is, it's not just about hiring investigators. It may also be figuring out how to organize a hearings division within the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Catherine. Any other comments? I don't see anything else. Staff, would you like to comment?
Yeah, just to clarify the will come back part. I think that's important to clarify. So, staff does do the project planning. So some of the flow charts and stuff like that, that's not what definitely that's open to comment, but that is sort of the job of project management. At the same time, the choice of what subcommittees there are and how, you know, how the topics under consideration are addressed and in what order is the commission's. Some of that's already been done through the approval of the agenda and scope. And so that would require revisitation of that document, which is, again, we will, you know, have that opportunity again. And then some of that is sort of the more detailed stuff, like what are the subcommittees? And that is the part that, just to clarify the previous comment that was talking about coming back to the commission with. What happened in the last phase is what's notable in the bylaws and internal processes of the commission, either the full commission or the co-chairs of the full commission can create subcommittees. So that's a notable thing. If, you know, there's time next at the next meeting agenda, I believe, to discuss what those subcommittees would be. And at the full commission level, I'm going to verify that I'm not speaking about the wrong meeting. It is on one of the upcoming agendas. I'm 100% sure of that. Yes, it is on the agenda for next for the next meeting of the full commission. So with that said, it'll definitely be on the agenda there. There are a couple things that may be bigger picture, like should we be talking about this now or later, that may require revisiting sort of agenda and scope questions that the PAC has already done, but can revisit, just to clarify. And then the full commission will have the opportunity to discuss what the subcommittees for the next phase are as the full commission at the next meeting. So just to be very clear about what's coming back and what isn't. So, and also that includes things like, you know, how you want to, the comment that Commissioner Catherine just made about maybe this item should be in this type of document. That's also something that'll be, you know, up to discuss next week.
Thank you, staff. Is there no more comments? Then we can go to the next item on the agenda. There's the garden plot recap. This is a time for facilitators, co-chairs, and staff to summarize any items already brought up today which didn't fit into today's agenda. We'll recap those items here and use them in developing future agendas. We won't be using this time to add new items not previously mentioned or to discuss any items, but we will use this list to develop future agendas so these items can be addressed. I will send it to the co-chairs first to see if they have any items. No? Co-chair Aji, co-chair Christian.
Nothing comes to mind for me other than the, you know, finishing up the documents that we're trying to approve right now.
Thank you. Co-chair Tirsa? No?
I do not.
And co-chair Aji? No?
Nope.
Thank you. I will pass it then to staff.
Nothing on this item.
And Dr. Moses?
Nothing on this item. Thank you.
Thank you. Then that's all. We're gonna thank you everyone for your hard work, for your presentations, and thank you the interpreters, and thank you the public meeting and your questions. As a reminder, you now can submit advanced public comment to the Police Accountability Commission via web form, voicemail, or postal mail. Thank you to all the members who attended today's meeting and for your contributions. Thank you also to the interpreters. And thank you to the members of the community for attending. If you're not already signed up for email updates, please also sign up to receive updates for the PAC. The next meeting of the PAC will be Thursday, January 26th for the full commission. It's now 9:11 p.m. and this meeting is adjourned.